What's up, everyone? Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Marie Montmarquet, co-founder of MD Numbers. Hello, Marie Montmarquet. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. Before our recording here, I was going through your Weeds Day playlist, and I gotta say, I am impressed with your selections. You had 5 of them, and you did well. So,
It was a lot harder than I thought to pick 5 songs. I was like, oh no, this one, cut this out. But by the end, I was like, okay, I'm content with these 5 songs. And
yeah.
it was funny because a lot of my friends hadn't heard, like some of my younger guys that worked for our delivery, like, what are these songs? I'm like, what's happening to the youth?
I know, right? It's like they have so many options to choose from. They don't know what the real classics are anymore, you know? But we got to let the audience know because they can't see it. So it's Wiz Khalifa, Still Blazing, which is awesome. Anderson .Paak might be on his Venice album. I have the Malibu album, but I need to get the Venice album.
Venice album is good.
Yes. The Fugees, what is it? Fuji La?
La.
And that I hadn't really heard, to be honest with you. It was really good.
That was a good one.
Yep. Lauryn Hill, Everything is Everything. And Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? So well done, girl.
Thank you. What's going on?
For today, right? You're absolutely right about that. It's crazy. So speaking of, where are you located? Where are you at?
Right now, today, I'm in San Francisco, right kind of in the Mission area, pretty central. And then usually working out of San Francisco, and my distro office is right down the street, and we have a manufacturing permit down the street. And then our farm is about 2 hours south in Salinas.
Got you. Okay, so primarily Bay Area, farm being in Salinas. So people listening, this is Marie Montmarquet. She's a co-founder of MD Numbers. It's a family of vertically integrated cannabis brands, and we'll jump into those brands here in a minute because I'm really interested to learn more about how diversified you are in the market. But Marie, why don't you tell us how you got started in all this and your background?
Totally. So I've been in California for a little over 10 years. I'm originally from Nashville. And when I went to college at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, I wasn't really into cannabis in the beginning, but I learned a lot more as I was going through my junior year, my senior year, and I decided I really like cannabis. I really enjoy cannabis. I like the way it makes me feel. I like the people that are involved in the social aspects of not just listening to what the government tells us to do traditionally, and the groups of people I was being around. And I realized I really want to sell weed, but I really don't want to go to jail. So I moved to California in 2010 and was working for my own company then, running connections inside of Best Buy and Costco. And so I come from commission sales. I really understand sales and the sales psychology, and it led me to delivery. So I built my first delivery service in 2015 in Redwood City, California. So right on the Silicon Valley Peninsula area. And our first delivery did really well, and we expanded to LA shortly after. And at that point, we realized we need to get vertically integrated in order to actually capitalize in the LA market, because the price for cannabis was much cheaper there. So we realized we needed to get a farm of some sort, start cultivation. So everything kind of came in as a phase by phase approach, with just getting all of the knowledge together and understanding the market back then when it was still Prop 215. So things are a little different. And then using that time to really learn everything that I could. And then we expanded into the cultivation. And then during that time, of course, you're always a little bit involved in distribution, being part of delivery as well as cultivation. And then when Prop 64 came online, we got distribution permits. nursery, processing, and cultivation down on our farm. And then we have distribution in San Francisco and manufacturing in San Francisco. And so everything's kind of like been building and building on top of each other, so everything can seamlessly operate in the market without having to get lose our shirt.
Right. Right. Well, that's the unique position that you're in, and it's a fortunate one. Is that you moved to California right at the time when, you know, adult use was about to be in full effect, recreational THC, right? And so you found one area of the business, and then just like you said, it was like a building block effect where once you kind of mastered one area, you thought, okay, now let's try to tackle this component of the supply chain or of the market, right, or the industry.
Like Tetris, almost.
Yeah, so like you're a professional Tetris player.
I'm a professional cannabis Tetris player, and just really analyzing too, just because you can do anything in cannabis, is what I say, but you might not make money. So it's always important for me to just like make sure that we were spending our time in places that are actually going to be profitable at some point.
So let's talk about the different Tetris pieces then, right? We'll start with that analogy. I like that analogy. So your first Tetris piece, it wasn't delivery. What was the first one? Because you said a lot.
First Tetris was the first thing that I did, like legally compliant. I was a salesperson for a company called Herbal Organic Supplements.
Okay.
And I spent my summer going around to every single storefront in the Bay Area and getting told no. So it was good. It was a really good start just for getting my feet wet.
These were THC products or?
Yeah, they were super cool company. They mixed a lot of herbal, like ginseng and white pepper, different things for your digestive system, different things that would go together with the full spectrum oil in your body and give you energy or help you sleep or just give you some sort of like daily supplement, and all THC based. And for me at the time, I just realized like it wasn't good to go around this is about 2014. So I was going around to every single storefront and they would be like, do you have some flour? I'm like, no, just these pills. Do you have any edibles? No, just these pills. So I was like really learned that like I needed to, if that was the lane I wanted to be in, I needed to get a full rep group and have a large set of brands to go into this place.
And that's when so you're seeing an opportunity in the market because you're saying, oh, okay, outside of these pills, they're actually wanting flour and edibles, right? And then so then you saw I guess the need for delivery, right? Or the convenience of delivery for these customers. Is that what?
Exactly. Like I lived in what you call dry county. You're probably familiar with those in Texas, Tennessee, alcohol, same thing. So Cannabis has a dry county in San Mateo, which is right south of San Francisco and north of San Jose. So it was just opportunity city for me when I was like looking around. I was getting deliveries on the regular basis and I was unhappy. Like I think 1 out of every 5 I would get. I had 2 companies out of 10 companies that I was like, okay, these are reputable. I like these and I'll repeat business. So I was like, there's a huge opportunity here for delivery. Not only it's a dry county, but not that many people were doing delivery at the time there too. And it seemed that the people that were doing it were not capitalizing.
So that business model seems like there'd be a lot of overhead initially, right? Because was it just you manning a vehicle, or did you have like try to get a fleet of vehicles, or even just like a couple of cars? Like,
right.
How did you go about that?
So it's definitely like delivery is a high labor intensive, of course, a lot of overhead involved. During Prop 215, there was a lot less overhead due to just lessening of the regulatory framework and the compliance framework. You still had to have workers' comp, you still had to pay your people, still had to have cars. So it was expensive for sure. But when I started, me and my brother were our only employees for a long time. So it kept things pretty cheap. And then I had a car I bought just to do deliveries with. And then he was doing deliveries. And then we didn't hire anyone for about 2.5 months, I would say. We just tried to bootstrap it and then get profitable before we even hired anyone. But yeah, it was expensive, like overall to start delivery because you have so many different things that are not cost of goods.
Right. And there was no risk of like the feds or like the cops pulling you over and like cuz Prop 215 made it legal, right? So
Right. Yes and no. So like being in that dry county, it's a little bit grayer because it's definitely more of very conservative area when it comes to cannabis. They're pretty strict. Me, for instance, like even though I paid taxes and I had a business license, even from Redwood City at one point when it got closer to regulation, I couldn't go to an office in Redwood City and say, hey, I have a delivery company. Will you give me an office? No one would give me an office. So it was a lot of like, they want the tax dollars, of course, but at the same time, we still, in some ways, I feel protected from the feds. Like I've always felt protected from the feds, but from local police and even my HOA at one point had like, oh, they were gunning for me, Kevin. Like every day, they were like, those people got to be doing something completely illegal over there. And they had harassed some of my drivers and all sorts of stuff. But it was just a challenge it was almost like whack-a-mole sometimes. Like, all right, but we got to be over here. Okay, is that cool? Nope. Landlord said we got to go. All right, we're over here now. Okay, can't find it. Like, and even the offices that we would find, I couldn't, even if I wanted to tell them we were selling cannabis legally, they would be like, okay, well, I need you to leave.
wow. And that game of whack-a-mole, I mean, still is apparent today even in the California scene. Is I mean, it will specifically when it comes to like banking, right? I mean, there's still a lot of banks that aren't really playing ball with a lot of these cannabis companies. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, I would absolutely agree. We've had like for my farm, we've had it for 4 years, and farming and cultivation, since it's attached to big ag, and you can do a lot more due diligence for the bank. It's the easiest to get banking, and it still took us 4 years.
Wow.
So I mean, yeah, like we literally just got a bank account, and we had to send them. I mean, we had to get our attorneys to just put together a whole file and send them all this information, and it's attached to our metric. So purchase orders come in, they verify it on metric, and that is still, our bank is out of Ohio. So it's like, I mean, we hope it's not whack-a-mole because Lord knows we don't want to shut this down and have to move. But even our bank, like they are an umbrella corp and underneath them, they have banks. So they're like, all right, if this bank shuts down, it's no problem. We can go over here, we can go over here. And that's from, the legal aspect. So even for those that have it utterly figured out, they're still playing whack-a-mole in a lot of settings.
Wow, that's so crazy. It's almost like when you're saying that they're umbrella, they're like structured in a way where they know that if one bank decides to do away with their business with cannabis companies, that they can just shift it over with no problem because they know that their other, sister company or sister bank, excuse me, has those regulations in place, right?
Exactly.
It's so
And they're prepared because, I mean, even for like on the delivery side, we had on an old business, they had 3 or 4 transaction accounts, we'll call them. And just knowing that, like, okay, we can only run so much a day on each of these accounts, because if you run more than that, then these accounts are going to get shut down. So it's like, boom, whack-a-mole to here, boom, whack-a-mole to here. And like, they would tell me that they have to tell the drivers at a certain time, like, all right, switch. All right, switch. Because it's literally that delicate of a piece. And unfortunately, even just dangerous to be in an all cash place, right?
yeah. I mean, after we're on our 32nd episode, and like most cannabis business owners that have been on have all said the same thing, in that like it's so difficult to navigate the legislations and regulations that are put in place because they change so fast, so quickly, and so frequently, right? So it's like you almost need like a head of litigation or like someone that's just hyper focused on the state laws and the federal laws so that you can stay,
Oh yeah, bro. I always joke that like we are building the plane while we're flying the plane, while we're disassembling parts of the plane and re-putting the other parts of the plane. And you can obviously tell that the regulatory system was written by a group that never moved like logistically with cannabis. So just at the very, very basic point of logistics for us, it's overcomplicated so much that it increases every piece of paper that has to be moved 10 times instead of just moving it one time.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of legislators now that just have I think they're just completely uneducated when it comes to not only the feeling of intaking cannabis, right, and smoking, because most of them probably haven't done it, or just the unwillingness to understand the applications for hemp and the medicinal benefits and all that, right? Because industry is at risk at that point.
I would also say, like I did an internship at the state capitol when I was in college, and at the end of the day, most of the laws and our legislators are all educated by people younger than me, that are like their staff, they're different interns, or they're different staffs, and like when they get a bill, they're not reading the bill. No. They get so many bills, right? They're basically just, all right, what's the talking points? What's the main takeaways? What do I need to know? What's the party line voting? All right, we're done. That's all we need to know, right? What's the party line voting? Okay. Oh man, this is a bipartisan issue. Okay, tell me a little more. But in reality, we as citizens of this state or this country, we know in reality so many bills are coming across these legislators' desks that if something is not lobbied specifically and put in front of them specifically, then they probably have no idea about it. Like they literally have no, like even in LA, legislators literally thought that putting a ban on vaping would decrease the illicit vape sales. We're like, guys, like, no, like this is the only place that people can go get legally lab tested, clean vape sales. And studies have proven if you allow that to so you're working with
I can totally relate because, okay, so I did a semester in DC, my junior year of college in 2010. And I worked on the journalism reporting side, which is a whole other issue. We got to visit every media outlet there, and it was just crazy, their practices. But on the government side, my roommate was actually interning with a senator from his state. And to your point, you're exactly right. First off, these politicians, they don't have enough. No human has enough bandwidth to keep up with all the bills that are coming forward, and having knowledge as to what each one entails and all that. And so he would tell me that there were times when senators would even forget to, like, they'd be running down the halls to the elevator to make the vote in time because they had been lobbying or pushing this legislation for so long, and they had so much other things to do that they would forget to vote on it. So you're completely right. You're completely right on that. Yeah.
That was like my one takeaway from my internship was like, oh man, kids run this place, but we have to change how we're running it because we need to educate these people a little more to vote in a more like educated manner, of course. But that was crazy to watch.
Well, and in some states like Texas, I'm kind of just amazed that the House in Texas, the Capitol, like all legislators meet. I think it's like every 2 years, like for major bills and whatnot. So, like in that time frame, that's real. Where like they either need to be self-sufficient and educating themselves on what's going on, or at least have a team to help them. But if not, I mean, they're just meeting every 2 years and talking about things that are new and evolving. It's kind of crazy.
Take me off in the last 2 years. I was like, okay, that's all good. Texas is really interesting, just of course in itself, but it's a place that's got like so much unregulated things and then so many like super regulated things. So it blows my mind like to see the things in Texas that are just completely open versus the things that are like
You mean like the gun laws, right? Like and how it's open like that, but then there's other things that are like nope, like THC, for example, not a THC.
Or like I couldn't believe how they deregulated electricity there. And like that's something that we would never do in California. I wish, like that's one of the reasons we have so many fires is because we have a monopolized utility district from like we have two utilities basically. We have PG&E for Northern California, and then we have LADWP in Southern California. And because they've given such massive power to this utility district, it's asinine. Like they blew up the city of San Bruno 6 or 7 years ago, and then they just raised their prices to the tax dollars to pay. They're like, all right, you guys are going to pay for us blowing up this town. Don't worry about it.
And it blew up because why? Because it had too much energy. It's taking on too much. Only two providers, or what?
So not only do they do electric, but they do like Pacific Gas and electric. Down south, LADWP does everything. I mean, they do everything but gas. They do your sewer, your water, and your electricity on one bill. So they're controlling so much in your house that for us in Northern California, it's just the gas. Like they don't have very tight restrictions on making sure there's no gas leaks, and there's gas leaking all over Northern California. And it's sad.
Crazy.
When you give so much power to one company, then that's what you get.
That's what you get. It's a monopoly, right? Yeah. I think we're seeing that in the telecom space also, but that's another story. So let's go back to the Tetris analogy. So we've gotten down the delivery Tetris shape. Now, what's the next shape that you put into this building block of MD numbers?
So delivery one, I would say like our flat foundational piece was our first delivery that we started in Redwood City. And then I would say like we did a little L shape when we dropped the delivery down in LA. And that one was good too because it was still really foundational. But then we got the L because we learned that we could not compete unless we are growing weed, because everyone down there had a $35 cap. And we were used to people that like felt better about themselves when they spent $60 on weed. We were like, what's a $35 cap mean? Like, that's crazy. So that was like our little L shape piece. And then we dropped the farm on top of that. So that was like our next like very crucial building block. But at that time, like me and my brother never knew how to grow weed. So we brought in, a master grower that kind of ripped us off for.
You saw the pivot. We need to grow because you saw the competition out there and you saw that a lot of people were doing this. And so you said, you know what, we can do this. And then what? You're like, so
we started doing the research, right?
Yeah.
Just like we had some friends down in that same area of Salinas that had deliveries and had reached out and started cultivation. Some were going well, some were going horribly. But we were like, all right, we want to start cultivation too. What do we got to do? Who do we got to talk to? Where's the land? Where's the grower? Blah, blah, blah. So we found through our friends a guy who was going to do a 70-30 split. So he grows all the weed, he gets 30%, we get 70%. We were like, yippee-ki-yay, this sounds amazing. Like, we got a master grower. This guy, yeah. Fast forward, he knew we knew nothing. We just like were flooding him with money, and he was definitely not spending it in the places that we thought it was going. And like, we didn't know the price of dirt, even something like dirt. Like, let's say he says he spends 25 grand on dirt, he probably spent 10, like little things. And we just didn't know. We trusted him. So it was the catch-22.
To be fair, that growing, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm just learning about it now. So I totally can understand where, there's a lot of learning curve there because it's new. So go ahead.
Deep learning curve too, like deep learning curve. So because we had him, we had the confidence to start a grow, which was the beauty of it. Even though he definitely was not who we needed to come in and start anything. We needed to replace him very, very fast, and he was running away with all sorts of money. But without him, we wouldn't have been able to raise money because he was very eloquent in speaking to our investors and all of these different things. So we started round one. We're like, we need to raise money for this farm. We need to find property for this farm. We need to find a grower. So those are our three pieces that we were putting together. And because we found him, we were able to raise the money.
So there was a good thing that came out of it. I mean, it wasn't all bad. So that's good.
Totally. If we wouldn't have had him, we would have not been confident enough to start a grow. Because literally I've grown 2 plants in my life, and I didn't really cater them very well. So yeah, it wouldn't have been good. So we found him. That was beautiful to get it started and just start getting into this like phased approach of learning. Really, for my brother, he started going down there and just diving into cultivation and learning about how everything, like all the processes that need to be automated, all the nutrients that could be upgraded or replaced, or our fertilizer, our harvest cycles, like changing everything. Like everything needed to be changed. So it's been we've learned more down on that farm than probably anywhere else, just from all of the different personalities and things that are happening. And like, we're dealing with a live plant that anything can go wrong. And even from our point of like post-production, it's a whole nother animal, right? So you could grow, we know a lot of people that grow really, really good weed and then ruin it in post-production. So learning about all these pieces. And then of course, after we grew it, we're instantly involved in distribution for getting to that next sale, the next piece, right? So we got the delivery, then we built another delivery, then we dropped the cultivation on top of it. Then of course we have distribution pieces running in there. And at that time, we also had an indoor cultivation going on that's much smaller. This was during Prop 215 still, so we had a legal Prop 215 grow. And we were taking that indoor that we were growing and putting it on our delivery menu. And that's when like the vertical integration brain, really like the light bulb starts to come on, because all right, we were like, how many places can we sell a $45 eighth? Like that's the goal, right? Like we're selling a pound and that eighth is being sold for, let's say $12.50 or $15. But if we can get that end user sell and we can collect that full margin, then we could literally do nothing else,
right,
but build that model extremely well and make money hand over fist in comparison that somebody that's working backwards in another fashion, right? Or just horizontally integrated. So we were like, all right, we're taking this flower that we're growing in this Prop 215 in the indoor, taking it through to the delivery menu and getting about $5,500 a pound instead of maybe $2,000 a pound, right? So this is where everything really starts. Okay, we're moving, we're grooving.
right.
That model still holds, like even with all of the taxes and all of the new regulations with Prop 64, like if you have a retail and you are selling the majority of other people's products, you're probably losing money unless you're charging for shelf space.
Right.
But if it's your own products right now, like in the past that wasn't true. You'd be slinging anybody's products and making money. But now with the way the regulations are, you really have to be vertically integrated somewhere. So that would be like, boom, distribution. And then underneath there, you've got like the Tetris piece of processing, dropping in, post-production, the trimming, the lab testing. You've got the nursery piece going in, which is unbelievably crucial. Like the most important room in our entire cultivation is the nursery.
And that's the curing process, right? When you're drying it after you've harvested it, the flower.
Yeah, we have yes and no. So you've got curing going on at the very, very end, and burping, like once you cut down, you like burp in the bags because you want to get the moisture out. And then you're going to collect, that good smell again, but then you want to burp it to get all the moisture out. And then you're going, and so that's like you're starting your cure. And then you're going through your trim, and then finally we hand trim everything on our farm. So we grow for just bag appeal and THC and taste. So the things that like true connoisseurs really want to see. Of course we're growing for volume too, because we got to pay our bills, but that's really what we like to see.
Yep. And then I would imagine the terpene aromas are incredible also, right?
Oh yeah. Okay, all of Salinas can smell this. But it smells like right now we have a really good wedding cake cross that we run that's just super strong. It's really resilient. The trichomes are just amazing. The smell is amazing. It's just gassy, but it's a little sweet. It's like it hits most of like everyone's favorite points of a nice flower.
Nice.
But yeah, so then on the other side, so on our nursery, so down the line when we're done with cut everything down, we're drying it, we're over here post-production. On our nursery side, that's basically where we make all the babies. So we've got all these moms in there, and we've got the most unbelievable nursery team, and Rosa's in there, and she's just like taking clones all day, like the best clones from the best moms from like, and they select, it's like selective breeding, like anything, right? Like we try to just pick the best, keep the best, pick the best, keep the best, and then get new moms in there a lot, so we don't have a lot of viruses or incest. You know, the further you clone, you get more and more problems. But in that room, she takes about 15,000 cuts a month. And
Wow.
we sell some, and then we grow out another 5 to 6,000. So we harvest on a monthly cycle about 5,000 plants every month. So she does all that in the nursery. And that's also where we realized, like, the nursery is such a crucial piece in that Tetris analogy. I love the Tetris piece. But the Tetris analogy, because it's another point of profit that we never thought about, because we never sold clones. You know, this wasn't something that we were into. But a lot of people are like, oh man, I want to grow weed. But clones root in 10 to 14 days, and you can sell those clones. And a lot of people have created very successful businesses from a really healthy nursery and really good genetics. And that's something that, like, a lot of people don't even think about, but by default, you know, having a nursery on site allowed us to create a whole nother revenue stream just thinking about selling clones.
I never, yeah, I'm surprised as you're talking because I never thought of that before, but it makes total sense. And when you talk about the volume of what you said, 5 to 6,000 plants per month,
Right.
um, are those all different strains, or is that one, or I mean, how many strains are you messing with?
We try not, like, so one thing that I realized that I never thought about before, you know, I'm as a buyer, because I was always a buyer, like, people are bringing me weed. I'm like, oh, it's good, it's bad. Okay, show me something new. And as a buyer, we're so desensitized to, like, how hard it is to change strains. Like, you bring me, you know, red Congolese this week, cool. I expect you to bring me something different next week. Like, my customers expect to see something
Yeah.
different this week, right? So it's such a massive undertaking for these large grows to switch strains, and to grow a lot of strains too. One thing that you'll notice is, like, it just becomes ubiquitous. Like, the smells they smell all kind of similar. They look very similar because each of them are, like, trading traits almost throughout the process because they're, like, so close to each other. So that's one thing that kind of, like, I mean, you don't want to put a lot of strains in one room. Like, one, they're just, it's hard to change. So that can be, you have to plan that out. And then two, you don't want them to be exchanging, like, terpenes and traits. But we're very, I guess, like, since we come from the sales side and the distribution side, and we come from just, like, understanding what connoisseurs want to smoke and what strains are popular, and not necessarily, like, we don't play on the popularity necessarily. We just play on, like, what we know. If you closed your eyes and you smelled this bag, would you buy it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the ice cream cakes might be popular, but it doesn't have to be ice cream cake. You know, just if something gassy, something sweet that, like, hits your nose, you really love it.
I
We
would.
just found that's, like, a much safer place than, like, a lot of people have to play that constant game of switching to stay relevant.
I would agree with you. And then also I would say the taste when it's inhaled, you know, because there's sometimes where you could smell something that's really and looks really beautiful, but when you actually burn it or smoke it, it's different, you know. Um,
Right? And it's not smooth, or,
yeah,
like, harshness is a huge factor too for me.
yeah,
I'd rather have something I can smoke throughout the day, you know, not something I'm like, oh my God, my
right,
throat hurts.
right, exactly. You feel like you have like something in the back of your throat the rest of the day. That's not a good experience. No, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, all of those things, like, right now we have, to answer your question more directly, we have 2 bays. They're like tester bays, and each bay has about 500 plants. So we have about 1,000 plants at all times that we're kind of, like, tinkering with. And our master grower, Casey, is, like, a, a scientist when it comes to crossing genetics, and he has some really exclusive, really, really strong genetics, and he's always playing around crossing them all, like, seeing what he can do, right? So we have a couple of bays where we test large amounts, and then even smaller, like, we have, I would almost call, like, R&D bays, like research and development bays. But
Yeah.
we have him at the very end, also just messing around with some different breeding. So he's went home, pollinated the plants, right? Brought the females back, and now we're growing out the females to see what the baby produced. So
Nice.
that's another thing that just got super interesting. as far as like cultivation and nursery goes, being able to like have a breeding room or breeding team, or being able to get into breeding would be something that we're really interested in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like your master grower is that he's like a mad scientist back there in those research bays, and he's just whipping up new new strains, and that would be the coolest part, I think, to see is just how you're innovating in that way. That's really cool.
He's definitely like a lifetime. He'll do this forever. He loves plants. His dad grows weed. His dad's dad grew weed, and it's beautiful to like see someone. I don't have like a green thumb per se. I love going to the farm. I love talking to the plants, and but like that's just not my favorite forte.
Right.
So it's amazing. I've always heard too that the growers aren't necessarily the sellers, because that psychology doesn't always relate. Like the growers want to stand there and talk to their plants and like their plant people, and then you need the distribution side. You need people, right? So you're working with all those different types of personalities, and it's amazing like to see his passion for the plants and like just what he can do and how much he understands. And growing weed is like there's so much art to
It's
it.
art. Yeah, definitely an art.
So much art. Like it's a science, of course, but
Right.
it is art.
Yeah.
And like he I wish I knew some of the things he knows. It's just unbelievable to watch him like just tell you about a plant.
Absolutely, and it's changed over the years too. I mean, from what our parents used to smoke and grow compared to now, it's insane. But with the times changing, so you've talked about these Tetris analogy and how you've built MD numbers and how it's vertically integrated, has these different cannabis brands. Do you see yourselves pivoting into the industrial hemp industry anytime soon, since the hemp bill was passed in 2018?
That's an amazing question. So I'm from Tennessee, like I said, being right there next to Kentucky and Kentucky's killing the hemp game, maybe a little too much right now. I was super interested in hemp. I went to the Hemp Expo, either like the end of 2018 or 2019, somewhere around there, and just learn. Like my thing, I'm just like, I like just learn everything I can first and identify where the opportunities really are and not where I think the opportunities are, where the tend to be wrong. And when I went there, in the beginning, I was like, before I went, I wanted to get into hemp a lot more than I did when I left. Because when I left, it just seemed like they were growing so much hemp and didn't have people to sell it to, was like one of the most common themes I was hearing. And my main takeaway from it was, you can do really well. You can, there's tons of opportunities in hemp, but you do not grow hemp not knowing who you're selling that hemp to.
And that's a really good point. And part of that reason, not just the selling part, but another huge bottleneck that I've seen from my home state, New Mexico, and even will happen this year in Texas, is the infrastructure is not in place. So there's not enough processors and extraction.
No processing facilities, right?
Yeah, so that's a big gap right now, I think, nationally, is that these, like, to your point, these farmers can grow this industrial hemp all day long. I mean, you can throw the seed outside. You don't need to worry about indoor cultivation with hemp, but there's just not enough processing plants and extraction labs to take that plant and then produce goods or
Absolutely.
out of
My
it.
one of my best friends is an attorney in Tennessee, and she does a lot of hemp advising, and truly just understanding. I'm like, you're gonna create all this hemp, but if you don't have access to what they call the decortification machine to take it and turn it into fiber, which is a very expensive machine, and if you don't have these contracts built out with these regional processors, because we're all very like, oh, hempcrete, oh, there's all these products, oh, who is it? Porsche, and I don't know. There's all these car manufacturers that are using hemp in their doors and using. But if you don't know that guy that is buying that hemp from and no, they're not buying it as biomass. They're buying it as fiber, and you have to create that entire infrastructure and not be like just blinded by the possibilities, and really actually understand how your hemp, and like truly too, I just would see so many people that were like, yeah, they grew all this hemp and then it just degraded because they had nowhere to send it. And now it's almost worth nothing because they didn't really know post-production. It seemed like post-production too just seemed like, whew, like, what do you mean? I can't just let it sit there. And I'm like, bro, it's like, a leaf falls from a tree and disintegrates eventually, right? Like, you have to be able to keep this dying plant in a usable manner for so long. And I would see a lot of the farmers that just are like, man, shooting themselves in the foot. So it also just depending on like, are you growing for industrial reasons, or are you growing for, of course, hemp and the hemp oil? And then what does that look like? I think that totally two different sides of the story. And no matter what, don't grow it unless you know who you're selling it to, was my ultimate takeaway. And the one of the senators or someone from Kentucky was there, and he's just like, I mean, we got enough oil here in Kentucky being grown right now. We got enough for at least the next 15 centuries. We could sell enough CBD hemp oil for enough Americans every day. You could take an ounce. And I'm just like, oh man, like, okay, I don't think we need to grow more hemp oil. Is that CBD oil? Is that what I'm being heard? And then I got even more interested in like just learning, right? So I went to New York because I had a couple of friends up there that had CBD stores and just wanted to learn like more about like, not necessarily industrial side because I just don't have that experience, but more on like the retail and the distribution and understanding like the actual medical side of the hemp. And that I definitely saw opportunity. Like my friends that had stores there, they were doing well. One of my friends had opened up 3 stores. They were expanding.
Yeah.
The international treaties, of course, like some of my friends also have contracts where they can ship hemp all around the world, not all around, but depending upon the treaty. So what I learned was I really needed to learn a lot more. And I definitely like have put just like a temporary pause on all my hemp aspirations, but I definitely was like wrote a bunch of business plans, was super interested, still super interested. And then one of the things I've been like just ear to the ground, especially like in the South and in Tennessee, was they're gonna backdoor THC to the hemp to big ag. Not that many people are that aware of the current process, but you have to be registered with the state for hemp seeds. And what the state is going to do are basically, grandfather in those that were registered to sell hemp seeds in Tennessee. Those will most likely be the first people allowed to get the cannabis permits. So it's definitely happening. I mean, and Tennessee's number one good old boy state that there is. If they want to do anything backdoor, they will. And that's pretty much how the South will be won on the hemp side, is being like, you have to be registered to this hemp CBD coalitions and get in the game and get with those guys, and then you'll have a chance to kind of ebb your way into compliant cannabis.
And you're saying that will happen when Tennessee goes legal for THC, right? So when that happens, the people that have already been involved in the CBD hemp space will be grandfathered into the THC market.
Most likely. Because
put a cap to the licenses for THC? Like there is that? Yeah.
I see Tennessee as a place where we all know like the people could want anything and it doesn't matter. They don't like we don't even get 5 cents for recycling. We want it, but they're like, no, we won't do that. Like that, like literally as like a piece of policy, Tennessee does not care what the people want. Tennessee will do whatever it wants in that state legislature, however they see fit. And since Tennessee is such big ag and controlled a lot by big ag, I mean, it's so fitting with like what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. But being able to just pull the wool over everyone's eyes and just hit a couple buttons before everyone else has even started, Tennessee most likely will try to do that more than anyone else. And the people, even if they try to stop Tennessee, it's going to be hard. it will be hard for them to stop. So
Well, hey, that could be a prediction that when that happens, we can always cut this clip and we can say you were right.
play that back.
Make
Play
it,
that back.
yes, play it back. Exactly. It's interesting what's happening nationwide and how each state's approach to cannabis, right? I mean, obviously, again, industrial hemp is legal at the national level, but there's some states that are medical only, and there's some states that are just decriminalized, and there's other states that are full blown adult use for THC, and then you got CBD sprinkled everywhere. It's a weird time.
And even with hemp CBD, maybe you can answer this. The feds, of course, were making their ruling, but they haven't finished their ruling, right?
The FDA has been dragging their feet when it comes to regulations around CBD, when it comes to medicinal and like I think for like food and stuff also.
Because right now it's only supposed to be topical. It's not supposed to be ingested.
Right, but it is.
Right.
CBD edibles everywhere. I mean, in Texas, in Dallas, there's so many CBD shops. And another thing that's really interesting, I brought this up on the last podcast. What have you heard about Delta 8? What do you know about Delta 8?
I like Delta 8. I've worked with this group for a long time called Level Blends. It's funny, I have a Delta 8 package back over there, but it's mild high for your mind, for your body, not really like super psychoactive. But it's it's popular for those who know about it, I will say.
Well, I think
you don't really get like super stoned, which a lot of people appreciate.
No, and I think it's becoming super popular to the people that know because it's legal to buy in states where THC is illegal. So in Texas, I walked into my local CBD shop and I purchased a Delta 8 pen. And the reason why it's legal to sell in all states is because, from my understanding, the THC is derived from the hemp plants, which are 0.3 or less THC.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a way to sell
another line.
See, yeah, basically
another cannabinoid.
Yeah. So it's just funny that like with all these regulations, it just we just keep going all over this way, that way, that way. I mean, we need to just simplify this and just basically take it off Schedule 1, deschedule it completely.
That's my only option. I'm like, don't reschedule. Like that's us still letting the government win. Like, no, deschedule this drug completely.
Schedule 2 will do nothing. It won't do anything to help. What it needs to be is not scheduled so that there isn't so many barriers and challenges when it comes to all these different industries. We've now categorized the plant in 3 ways. You have hemp, which produces material goods. You have marijuana, which is a term deemed by the government to stigmatize the plant in the 1960s, where it did schedule it as a Schedule 1 narcotic. And then you have cannabis, which are basically cannabinoid products that have 0.3 or less THC in them, more CBD and CBG stuff.
Right.
So it's super confusing,
Confusing. So, and then like even in California, from a business standpoint, you've got multiple regulatory agencies to deal with to do one thing. And no matter what, you've got a Bureau of Cannabis Control, California Department of Food and Agriculture, California Department of Public Health. If you're growing outdoors, you got Fish and Game that you're dealing with. I mean, you're like, how many people can you deal with?
And then, I mean, on the growing side, all the complexity, I know you don't really see that on the THC side because you guys are full-blown adult use in California, but the growing here is a nightmare in Texas. If you're growing hemp outside, you better make sure that you have the right seeds, the right genetics. You're making sure that your crop isn't overexposed in the sun to where it goes hot. I mean, there's so many things that you have to deal with, and I heard, I don't know how true this is, but I heard at one time the USDA was trying to even lessen that 0.3% THC mark. So, it's difficult as it is. There's people that are trying to push for 1%, which would be, I think perfect, but it'd be easier, you know.
Right. So up to 1%, yeah, for sure.
To 1% is what people are wanting for. But at the time when I think a couple months ago, USDA was talking about making it even less than 0.3, which is insane. You know, that
Even with like the reality of cannabis is that, you know, you have to have that entourage effect for everything to
full spectrum.
benefit. Yeah, you have to have that full spectrum, like broad spectrum, whatever. But in reality, like the plant exists to work together. That's why all those cannabinoids are there together. And it's so sad that like a plant that has maybe thousands of cannabinoids, where we've only identified maybe 500 at this point, and then of those 500, we only focus on 2 or 4. So it's like obviously, like there's something missing here. Like the plant has to work together.
Right. And by the way, it naturally has been proven scientifically that it works with our body also, our endocannabinoid system. You know, we're
Right.
basically married with this plant biologically. So,
Right.
uh,
R R1, R2 receptors, TB receptors, right? Like
well, it's just going to take people like us to get older and get into office so that we can start making these changes. Not us specifically, but people that are interested in politics our age, you know, that have these viewpoints.
that's literally like I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, man, it's sad that the change will literally have to come from the antiquated people just falling over that have these like unchangeable viewpoints, and people that are obviously like, you know, human can come in and say like, this is right, this is wrong, this helps people, let's help people.
By the way, it also helps the environment. You know, like how the mass amount of CO2 emissions that it takes in. You know, it helps purify soils, and it's just a great. Sarah Yetman was on, and she said, you know, if you want to grow organic, different products organically, then grow hemp first, because it's going to purify the soil and clean it up, and that'll be a great start. You know.
Dude, that's what we learned in California lab testing, because our to your point about how every state's doing whatever it wants, even down to the lab testing, California has the strictest lab testing. Like I eat pretty healthy, and I'm pretty sure 90% of the stuff in my refrigerator right now would not pass California cannabis lab testing. Like it just wouldn't. It's like we have the strictest lab testing. We have parts per billion here that other states have parts per million. And even down to heavy metals, where, you know, what you're saying, like cannabis naturally leaches metals from the earth. But we, as growers and cultivators in the state of California, have to make sure it doesn't. We have to make sure we do not give it anything. We have to start with soil that cannot be heavy, like everything has to be so particular, because like we literally, like my coffee would not pass California. Like it's the things that we test for. And I at one point I was like, man, this is like unfair that we are so over tested in a lot of places. But then I thought about it the other day from a point of my friend, and I was just like, well, if this could set the tone for the Food and Drug Administration to actually look at all of the chemical intake that we as American citizens have an extreme, every year we take in more and more chemicals. It's ridiculous. And if we are testing weed, cannabis, pot, this stringently, please tell me I can stop eating yellow pot. Somebody.
Yeah,
like, please.
That's a really good point. I mean, hopefully that they mirror this kind of stringent process to our food and you know, the food side of it, because right now it's a wild west in that space also, right? I mean, look at how obese Americans are, and what we're being fed on a daily basis. A lot of things they're processed, you know, it's just not good. So I see your point exactly. Why aren't they doing those same regulations and policies on that side? That's pretty interesting.
And I go, on this, super strict. I'm eating this all the way through, digesting this through my body.
Right. Well, as we've seen this year, it being an election year, there's a lot of, let's just say, lots of issues and problems with the government, right? And it's been that way for quite a while.
Post office.
Don't even get me to the post office scam. But anyway, it's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? And but speaking on these issues, I know that outside of being the co-founder of MD Numbers and being a business owner, you're also focused on being an advocate for social justice and equity in the industry. So you're an advisor to the Cannabis Equity Program. Is that right?
For success centers in San Francisco, since everything was kind of put cart before the horse. There was a couple people that saw the carts before the horses and started trying to straighten some horses out. And Success Centers is a nonprofit in San Francisco that built it's the only neutral and successful workforce development and educational workshop space that's been created for people that want to get into the cannabis industry that were impacted by the war on drugs or just qualify for equity or what, equity programs everywhere are a little bit different, but if you were impacted by the war on drugs, then you can come to Success Centers and we will help guide you into hopefully starting a business. And that is what I've been like seeing what's happening, being able to like be at a place where business is going well, but I don't have to like sit with my head down and focus on myself. And I can look around and say like, man, a lot of these different laws are not made for people that were in the industry, legacy operators and people that were impacted by the war on drugs. And like, I've been arrested for weed. Most people I know have been arrested for weed. So making sure that like there's a reentry program, making sure that people can actually have a place to participate in a industry where people are going to jail right now for weed. And chances are they're probably black and brown. And chances are that those people should have an opportunity to exist in the thing that clearly they've risked their lives to participate in. So I just think it's like one of those points for like my lifetime that I don't really know how many, social justice things prior to this year. Of course, we got a lot going on right now, but I always looked at cannabis like modern day slavery in a way, like how is the privileged able to take this plant and the moment that they wanted to make money on it, okay, turn the flip. We're going to make money today. These people are still being arrested all the time, but we're going to make money now. And that for me was just like, I see corruption every day. We're in America. We're at this example test of capitalism, right? And I'm just like, if there's something that has to change, like in my lifetime, that I am like literally watching every day take place in front of me, and like the Chads get rich while everyone else gets screwed. And if there's anything that I could personally do to have an impact on that, was amazing. Like that's the point where I was like, wow, I would be crazy to sit here and let this industry be taken from all of us that clearly built it and are still going to jail.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a real problem. I mean, the fact that there's during the COVID pandemic, there's cannabis companies that have been deemed essential, but yet there's still people that have been locked up for petty crimes as it relates to marijuana. I think I read one article that this gentleman is finally getting out after 20 years for having one joint on him or something like that. 20 years ago,
Well, it's sad too, because you look at it and you're like, when you read the regulations on or the legislative framework on going to jail, we're like, okay, cool. Like we will just rewrite the laws. We'll take these people, and now we have slave labor, and now we have all of these corporatized companies that all use prison labor. We have a privatized prison system. We have judges that are paid to make sure they meet quotas to put people in jail. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's like, all right, well, clearly something is wrong. We all can agree on that. So what can we do right now to make it so that we can change some of these laws?
So your role is basically within that. Are you a volunteer where you kind of help and mentor?
Exactly.
These
so I volunteer for pretty much anything that they ask me to do. But right now I will we offer a monthly tour to our farm where we take a bus down there, we sponsor the trip, and we just give them a live experience to learn from nursery to post-production and ask any questions that they want. They get to see plants in all phases, and that's really beautiful. And then every other week, we have 2 different workshops. We have a job fair workshop where we're always hiring, and then we have an educational workshop called Equity for Industry Workshop. And during that one, we bring on like people like myself, so people that built businesses, people that are specialized in a certain area, whether it's government relations or permit analysis or how to build your POS system, what to look for, like pretty much everything that you need. All of these workshops come together, and I give workshops. We support the workshops. I teach, but then because I've been there now for a little over a year, like almost a year and a half now, I've watched a lot of people come through the program that I've just been mentoring and advising, and they call me, they text me, they send me contracts. They're like, Marie, look at this. Does this seem fair? And I'm like, yeah, no, maybe. Like, what's going on here? Tell me more. And so it's beautiful for me just to be able to like advise. And I'm no like, I didn't go to law school, but I have 4 attorneys. I'm not a CPA, but I have 2 of those too. And just to be able to like advise with some of the pitfalls that I've seen and I've personally experienced, to be able to like, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't do that. Don't do that. Set it up like this. That's why, you know, you're going to save yourself all this money down the long run, or talk to this person first. And just being able to like help them understand the economics as well as like the politics of everything going on, and making sure that they could take advantage of anything out there that would actually benefit them, and making sure that I can try and advise them to like stay away from things that clearly are not for them. And like even going into like the like predatory, I think cannabis right now has just become really predatory, and not even because of like anything racial, just like when you have a new industry, and when you have a lot of novice operators, and you have a lot of highly capitalized corporate investment coming in trying to suck up these novice operators and basically just like learn everything that they had operationally, all their skill sets, and maybe continue to work with them, maybe not. But it's almost like the sharks and the guppies, right? So in business, of course, you know, people are going to try and screw you. You know, people are going to come in and have this corporate mentality to just figure out what you do, replace you, figure out what you do, replace you. And that definitely came in really, really hard with cannabis. And one of the reasons was just because like was a lot of sharks. That you know, this industry, even like Bonner, our old like House representative, or you know, you've got people one minute that are like no, the next minute they've got $1 billion checkbooks out. And people like me who've not necessarily experienced all of these high level negotiations genuinely, or generally speaking, get taken advantage of pretty easy. So this ocean like got real choppy real quick. It was like, oh yeah, it was real smooth. Everybody was like, love each other, kumbaya. And then next thing you know, it was a lot of lies being told and contracts being written. And like, you know, my dad used to tell me a contract's only as good as the paper it's written on. Now I advise people, contract's only as good as the person that's signing it with you. Because I've had people write contracts all different ways with the full intent that they were never going to actually fulfill what they told me they would do. So understanding who you're dealing with, right? Understanding that these are types of people that it's not right or wrong. It's I'm going to do what I want and sue me if you don't like it mentality. And when you're dealing with that so fast, you have to be really, really careful. So that's one of the reasons why like I just got so involved with success centers, because I was seeing, you know, these predatory contracts, and contracts where like the equity owner has no control over their business. They have no control over their board. They don't even have a key. They have no operational, like, so it's a lot going on here where I was just like, whoa, like this is real. Like these are the real contracts that are being written. And then I like, you know, anything in the world could have been, hindsight's 2020, of course, right? But when you're sitting here and you're looking at these predatory contracts, and then I see like the Office of Cannabis spending so much time reviewing these contracts, when in reality they could have written the contract. They could have started with a fair contract. They could have created like here's how the board has to be. We want the equity holder to have equal or more control on the board and no opportunities to be removed from the board. Or all of these different things could have been written. I mean, these are the smartest people there are, right? This is the city of San Francisco. This is the state of California. They pay all sorts of lobbyists to be able to write all sorts of things. And it was just sad from a policy standpoint for me that we didn't write any policy to protect any of these groups of people. We said, all right, yeah, like we want to prioritize processing. Like we want to give equity permits first, but we're not going to fund them. We're not going to actually make sure the contracts are not predatory. I mean, there's been equity applicants that partnered with really large conglomerates that the conglomerate sold the business before it even opened, mind you, sold the business to High Times without even his signature. He said no. He's supposed to be the CEO of his own business. The only reason why they have this storefront opening is because of this one person. He said no, and they were still able to sell his business to High Times.
Wow.
Like, and if it's one thing that I understand, it's like lawyers. And if the city, once again, wanted to like write protective legislation or policy for these contracts, they could have easily done so. And not only that, it would have saved tons of time for these permit analysis right now that are spending, you know, like we have 2 or 3 full-time permit analysis in the Office of Cannabis in San Francisco because they're combing through these equity contracts to see where in here are the equity people being screwed. I got to comb this entire, instead of saying like, all right, here's a template for how everything needs to look, and here's how, I mean, it all comes down to control.
Have you reached out to them to ask that? Like,
we're gonna say?
Like why, because I agree with you. Like, instead of going through and looking for fraud and taking all that time, just get to the heart of it by supplying these entrepreneurs, these new business owners, the right templates and wording for the contracts, right? Like, make sure that they're aware of how they could be getting screwed, is what you're saying.
Totally.
Yeah.
And even down to like taxes. Like, there's a lot of people who got K1s, or like if you have a partnership LLC, you can't write off all these tax liabilities. Long story short, you're going to owe a lot of money for these businesses because you have no tax write-offs. And you, as the equity applicant, might be liable for all of these taxes, and you may or may not even understand that. And it might not be the city's job to explain to you all your tax liabilities, but there's definitely, in each piece of this puzzle, there could have been policy written to prevent this. And I think like the problem for me is, or just when I analyze things, that the city was so underfunded with their Office of Cannabis from the start, and every city really was. It was like, instead of the state giving a loan to these cities based upon what tax revenue would have came in, and they could have just paid the loan back, but at least funding the staff and all of the departments to be able to like pass some of this progressive policy for protecting people. They've worked behind this whole time, and they're still working behind. So like, I would say that's one reason. Sadly enough, the other reason is because like, that's not what big business wanted, and right. Big business rules everything apparently. So big business wanted these contracts to be manipulatable and wanted them to be, of course, they have all the attorneys, right? Like, you've got an equity guy with maybe one attorney, might be pro bono, and then you've got these corporate, they might have 5 or 6 attorneys. There's no telling what they could have put in some of those, contracts. But for the city, I would say, like, to their credit, like, they barely even had employees. It was like these things should have came from the state. When we passed Prop 64, we should have said, all right, every city needs an equity program, and we're going to fund those equity programs with a loan that will be paid back based upon our expected tax revenue, or something of that nature. And we just kind of like let the chips kind of fall where they fell, and now we're just kind of like dealing with them just hanging all over the floor, and it's ugly.
Well, what you're saying, I mean, I agree. Like, in an ideal world, the government, state, local, and federal would be super efficient, right? And provide you the resources and tools and everything you'd needed. But I mean, as we've learned with 2020 and whatnot, they're just governments are extremely disorganized, right, and slow, and in some ways ineffective. I mean, there are good things, but it's been clear that there's been a lot of issues that we can tell with the government. Um, so, and I agree with you. In an ideal world, all that stuff would be available. There'd be coaching and there'd be advisors to walk you through and make sure that you're not being scammed or, getting caught up in fraud. And I know that that's been an issue even in the industrial hemp market. As you mentioned earlier, no contracts being in place. So these farmers lost out big in these first crops because they either assumed that it was just going to be so easy that they'd sell it, or they were talking to someone who was a shady character who screwed them over, because they didn't have contracts in place.
The sharks are all here right now.
They're all here. Yeah.
Like, some of them actually have their businessman shark hat on, and some of them are just robbing it. They're like, "Rah, I'm out of here. You got some hemp? Yeah, I'll pay for it. I'll be back in a week."
Yeah, give me a down payment though. Yeah, exactly. And then they run off.
I mean, I think to the point of like, oh, so many things were just done a little too fast. Also, like Prop 64, I didn't vote for Prop 64 personally because all the money went to the general fund, and I thought, oh, this is a just catastrophe waiting to happen. We're gonna earmark nothing, not for homelessness, not for roads, not for education. We're gonna take all the taxes that I pay, which is exorbitant, unreasonable amount of taxes, and I'm gonna send them to the general fund, and then even more like to the police. Like, oh God, this is exactly what I did not vote for. But I wanted everybody to get out of jail, but I'm just like, it's sad that like that's how we play this game. Like, well, in order to get people out of jail, we'll pass the worst policy that we can, but we're gonna rush this policy because California rushed every single piece of this policy. Prop 64, I mean, even down to metric, our track and trace is a joke. Like, everything, every single piece of the policy was rushed. And then all the people that wrote it never sold any weed before, didn't know what was going on, and now we're just like lobbying to like reduce taxes. And in reality, like, the black market is thriving more than it's ever thrived.
Yeah.
And like, you're just like, what did we do? Like, what did we do?
So in addition to lobbying, like what would you, if you had a wand, and you magic wand that just boom, you could have it your way, Maria, your world, what would you do to change what's happening?
It's I love that question. One, I would make sure it's mandatory for every single city and state across California to invest in programs that clearly help those that were affected by the war on drugs to get them involved in the industry. Like, before we get, every company going public in Canada happens, maybe we say like, oh man, look at all these people going to jail. I want just funded equity programs. So basically, super crucial. And the funding could also be a point of like real estate, where like what we all see. I would love cannabis to be treated how the state treats Amazon, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
You know how the state treats Amazon? The state's like, you want real estate? You can have all you want. We'll give you all the tax incentives you could ever want. You don't want to pay for something? We'll build you a road. You don't like anything you need, we will take care of every single tax break, every tax incentive. I don't need all of that, but fund the program, give tax incentives to work with these groups of people so they can find real estate, because it's no, like, we don't have to sit here and wonder how America came to be. If you were white and you had land, you had power. We're only 100 years from that. And what do most of these people or all of these people need? Land if they're going to open up a business. They need a building. And there's nothing without a building. You could in San Francisco, there's only 7 square miles, so it's very few buildings, and a lot of people fighting over those buildings, and very few amount of very powerful people have them all, right? Like, this is America. So understanding real estate's everything, giving people tax incentives so they could have access to real estate, having a reasonable protections in place for these, like the board control, the operating agreement, some of these things that could have been super streamlined to protect equity that just were not. Something else that I think is back to paralleling the Amazon situation. We don't have, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, Kevin. I want to take the things that currently exist in policy and use them in cannabis. Like, we have a banking investment act in like 1977. They wanted redlining to stop. You know, they wanted like banks to be responsible for investing in local communities that were usually disproportionately not invested in, right? We could also do that for cannabis. We have all of this tax revenue coming in, even though it's less than what the state thought it was going to be. Like, that should be reinvested into these communities. That should be reinvested into these people, into these businesses. Like, this is asinine if it should be any other way. It's just like, right and wrong. But so making sure that, like, I would take a certain amount of the tax allotment and reinvest it into the communities, just like the Banking Investment Act requires, and fund the programs and give access to real estate. Like, those 4 basic things. The predatory situation, of course, is like, that's just business. And sadly, like, people screw people every day in business, and that's the way it's set out. So we should absolutely not act like this is not going to be the same way. And like, the people that are getting screwed in this, though, I think what like kills me personally is like, they're not even, you know, like, let's say like me and my brother, you know, we've definitely like worked our asses off. We've sold weed for so long that like we're probably not your like average person that's getting screwed over out here. We're kind of prepared for being screwed at this point. The thing that kills me is that, you know, they spoke up these equity programs as if it was going to be like, we're going to help you. And a lot of these people have only taken on debt and don't even have a permit to show for it, because they're still paying rent on properties that have not opened up any retail. So you're like, okay, debt is not equity. You know, what is equity? How can we actually like stop arresting people for this industry that they participate in and let them make money from the industry that they participate in, and not cut them out of this industry? So for me, it's like, I'm a political science major. Political science and psychology is what I went to school for. And if nothing else, it's just the point of something has to be changed before we give cannabis to corporate America, right? Like, I mean, the beverages, I feel like people probably felt this way when Prohibition happened, right? Like, how many Jim Beans did we not know of that got screwed over? Tons. And now you look at the beverage industry and you've got what, like 4 people who run 50-60% of the entire industry. And we're like, is that what we want to happen to cannabis? Like, we're so okay with over corporatized things as like citizens of this great place. Like, we're okay, we're just gonna give it, like, we want 4 people to run cannabis? Like, that's not okay.
I've had an episode, Deborah Borchardt on. She's a financial analyst in the cannabis space she owns the Green Market Report. And sadly, because I asked her what the future of cannabis looks like, you know, from the THC side, and she said it's going to be corporatized. It's going to be Marvel buying everything up, and it's going to be, you know, and Sarah Yetman echoed that by saying CBD and THC are not going to save small town America. She's putting her chips on industrial hemp. She's saying industrial hemp is going to save small town America because it's going to bring everything back to the core. So with COVID going on right now, you're seeing a lot of young people moving back to their homes in rural areas. They're moving from cities back home. And she sees industrial hemp being just the ignition for the small economic, to provide small economic impact. Not only would it boost from producing material goods and extracting the cannabinoids for medicinal purposes, but also you employ people. You have a farm where you're cultivating this crop. You need processors, like you said. You need manufacturing. You need distribution. You need retail. So her belief is that, once the dust settles and we really understand what economic, turmoil where we truly are in, after this pandemic, it's going to be industrial hemp that gets us through.
I don't disagree with that. I think even if you look at like some of my friends that are very like Humboldt, Mendocino, they like working with their hands, they like growing their own food, they like living off the grid. Everybody's like, boom, I'm back to that. Like, I don't want, and to your point of us talking about like hemp, there's so many things you can do with hemp. It's better than cotton. It's better than all of these other industrial things that we use, but it also leaches the soil for you, right? So if you do want to farm, then boom, you put down your hemp first, and then you can grow up. I have another friend that has a THC cannabis farm that they're doing here, and they're calling it cannabis, kale, and cabbage, I believe. But they're growing, multiple different things on that one area.
Yeah.
And I think, like, me being from the South, like, I'm definitely sitting in a city that's like the opposite of where I grew up in, and like very small town vibes, like people moving real slow, like, hey, how you doing, blah blah blah. So I think I appreciate that people want to get back to that and understand that, like, we shouldn't be relying on the grocery store for every single thing that we do. We shouldn't like just go buy this bottle of lotion with 88 different things we can't pronounce and lather it all over our body. Like, we should have these naturally recurring things in our life. Like, that's so important. And I definitely hope more people, if nothing happens from this pandemic productive, then like people at least wanting to be in control of their own like
Yes.
consumption more.
Yes. And
like content, food, everything.
Right, exactly. That's super important. Everything that you consume, whether it's content, food, everything is important because it affects you in different ways, right? I don't want to skate over what you said, though. You made good points. There's a lot to dive into that, but overall, I understand what you're saying in that, before that corporatization happens in the THC side, we do want to see this industry give back, right? We want to see our tax dollars really go to work and be put back into those communities, back into those businesses, back into the workers' hands, so that there's more prosperity, and we've seen that happen in other industries where markets get oversaturated, things get really monopolized, and it's a recipe for disaster. So let's just hope that before that happens on the THC side, that we do see that,
And I think on that point, when everyone was getting these licenses, Kevin, you remember maybe like every single permit had all of these promises attached to it, right? Like, hey, we're Jim and Joe, and we want to open up Jim and Joe's storefront down here, and we are going to sit here and tell the city all of these ways we're going to improve the community, right? Because you're going up with, all these other people, right? Like, I got me and my brother, Marie and Alan are going to do this for the community. Jim and Joe are going to do this for the community. Blah, 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 are going to do this for the community, right? So we all had these community benefit agreements that we gave to the state of California, or the city that we were applying in. And I think one of the most crucial points that we have to do right now is hold those permit holders accountable for what they said they were going to do. Because even in some cases, like, the city really did a great job vetting, but they did a terrible job on checks and balances and on accountability. Because these places said, we're going to employ from disproportionately affected areas, and then they didn't. Or we're going to bring on equity product on our menu, and they don't. So just making sure that, like, if they said that they were going to pay a living wage, that they're paying a living wage. Like, holding these storefronts, even because that's one thing, Kevin, like me and you can agree on. We know cannabis is going to go corporate. Like, we know that. but at least hold the corporate companies that are coming in and grabbing up all of these licenses accountable to what they told us. This is what they told us. This is not what we made them. It was what they told us, and they said that they are going to have all of these different positive effects in the community. So let's see them. If not, like, give the permit to someone else that's actually going to do the career development they said they were going to do, the training they said they were going to do, whatever the impacts of that area were. Let's see. One of the things that will make you laugh is every permit holder had to turn one of these in, especially in LA, because I was working on something specifically down there. But no one will even show them to the constituents in the city that they gave them to.
Why is that?
They're like, I mean, even when you call and you're like, can I see this? They will like, they do not want to give you access to it, because then things will come from that, and they'll have to be held accountable. And no one says, hey, this is public information, and the Privacy Act is supposed to allow us to have this, information. As I personally called maybe like 30 different stores in LA just as a concerned citizen, and I have like address down there, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just a local concerned citizen, and I want to see if you guys have a community benefit agreement. And I'm like, who is this? Who are you? You're with the state. You're with the, like, no, like, I'm literally just a concerned citizen wanting to know if the business that we allowed to open up in our community is doing the things they promised to us they were going to do. And if me as a citizen, if that is asking too much from the people making the money hand over fist, or will be making the money hand over fist one day, then everything should stop. Everything.
Yeah,
hold apart.
I agree with you in that if they're gonna commit to something, they should fulfill it, or at least be, like you said, held accountable. If not, don't say you're gonna do it. And find an entity that will fulfill those commitments.
And that goes down to back to the funding, right? Because, well, how do we hold people accountable if there's no oversight committees that are funded, and it's nobody's job to hold these people accountable? And then it comes back to people like me who are just involved with different groups, like the social impact organization in LA was the one dealing with a lot of these community benefit agreements. But it's just like, bro, if this is reality, then we need to stop cannabis sales until this changes, because we're allowing people to get rich, or not even get rich, because there's no money in cannabis right now, but we're allowing these people to take over small business, consolidate, and corporatize without even doing what they said they were going to do to the local community. So that is a sham.
Yep. There's got to be some accountability held there for sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about a lot, Marie. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? It's been a pleasure, first off.
It was really fun. I always like just like having a good convo.
Yeah.
I think, I definitely addressed
all your notes.
Yeah, right. I just had 3 points that I feel like I definitely went over everything and more that I wanted to talk about. But yeah, I think we got a really good place. There's the takeaways for me are just like back to the point of every single state is doing its own thing in its own regulatory realm. And even when it comes to hemp, CBD, THC, and I think in reality, like, the takeaway for sure is just making sure that every city or every state that does want to partake in this industry does it for the right reasons, and like make sure to hold these businesses accountable, and making sure that it's fair. Like, people go to jail every day right now for selling weed. Meanwhile, people are making money every day selling weed. So let's make sure that we can stop some of this really I don't know, asinine behavior. It's just very controversial. Not even controversial, but it's very
contradictory. It's completely backwards. Yeah.
The hypocrisy here is ridiculous for sure. Like, I can't even I feel good every day about selling weed and helping people, and that makes me feel really, really good. But like, even just looking at Nashville, like where I was born and raised, and where I would love to be able to get involved in cannabis there, like, I was arrested there for cannabis. I've been through whatever there. And it would be really, really sad if people like me couldn't even participate in a
Mhm.
place like that, you know?
Mhm. Well,
That would
here's to keeping faith and you know, just looking to the future and looking to keep progressing in this industry. You know, that's all we can do, and really try to push our legislators to help educate and have them understand all the benefits of the plant.
totally, absolutely. And deschedule cannabis.
Deschedule cannabis. We need to deschedule.
Cannabis.
Schedule 2 is not enough.
No, that's a cop out.
It's a cop.
Ultimate cop out. We don't want that at all. And even with that, I mean, it doesn't like that. Like Schedule 2 basically allows us to say cannabis is still bad.
Yeah.
Like I can go to my freezer and drink a bottle of Hennessy and die on this floor right now, Kevin.
Mm.
And that is completely acceptable. And they don't have anywhere near the taxes that I do. So
No, not one person has been documented of overdosing on marijuana and dying, or say cannabis. I hate to use the word marijuana. So cannabis. It's never happened.
yeah,
It's impossible. Yeah.
they don't even know the lethal dose. There's like the lethal dose is you fall asleep first, and then we can't figure out what the lethal dose of cannabis is because there is no lethal dose. But we know the lethal dose of alcohol. And I was I think one of the craziest things. The point. This will be the point that I will leave with. I always say that like I went to Amsterdam University. The lady over there, Dell, is like phenomenal, and she just talks a lot about the science of cannabis, and then she talks a lot about the regulatory framework, and she actually brings in like the most unbelievable people to come in there and tell you all about the education and history and science of cannabis. And I learned, I'm like, oh, there's so many peer-reviewed clinical studies on cannabis. There's so many. And then there's so many just not peer reviewed, but just extremely, extremely intelligent, well written reviews. Okay. So there's all these reviews. There's peer reviewed, not peer reviewed, thousands of articles proving the science is saying that these things are healthy. And then you have a drug like Adderall. Okay. Adderall has under 300 clinically reviewed studies, and we give that to children. We prescribe that to children every day. We say, oh man, your kid can't focus, pop this in their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Every day with no clue what the effect of that kid will be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years, who knows, who cares? But we literally will give that to children every day. And you have a drug like cannabis that is proven. The science has proven that this is a medical healing drug, and you're gonna literally sit here and say, "No, we're not gonna make this legal."
Yeah,
we don't have enough information. Even Biden, like, we don't have enough. Everyone's sitting here saying they don't have enough information to deschedule cannabis is an utter liar or never even opened up a book.
it's because it's a risk to the industry. It's the petroleum, the wood. It's the medicinal pharma, big pharma. It's
For sure.
And the thing is that yeah, I mean, I'm my mind's going all over the place. It's so many factors that have been just implemented to protect certain interests. Let's just leave it at that.
Welcome to America.
Well, hey, it's crazy times, Marie. We are living in crazy times for sure.
Yeah. But it's also like, how was the West won? How was America won? Like, I mean, we live in a place where we can't act like we haven't sat here and Plymouth, like this is how we've taken over anything: violence and money and greed. And why do we want something? Gold. And I mean, this is the gold rush right now, right? This is where we are.
The green
rush. Just making sure that and it's hard, bro. Like the greed rules everything. So it's so hard to sit here and say like, man, we need to get people to do the right thing. If it was that easy, Kevin, people would do the right thing.
No, that's right. If it was that easy, everyone would do it. Exactly.
We're just sitting here singing Kumbaya.
Well, that's why we're here having these conversations to enlighten and educate people in the industry. And hopefully, politicians eventually will hear this message and start to wise up. But the whole point of doing this stuff is to just get information out and to destigmatize the plant. You know, we need to get past that. We need to get it Schedule One, like we've said. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. And I definitely want you on again, Marie, as things like progress and evolve and change for the good or the bad. You know, you're definitely one who likes to educate yourself, especially in different spaces in this industry. And it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
You, Kevin, I always say you don't know what you don't know, right?
That's right. And not there's not one person that knows everything. So it's good to collaborate and hear other people's viewpoints, because that's how you grow, you know?
If you're not growing, you're dying.
That's
So,
exactly right.
thank you so much for having me again. This was definitely a pleasure. I'd love to come do this anytime.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Will be some positive policy passed, hopefully in between now and then.
well, yeah, we're gonna be doing a cheers or something when that happens. So I look forward to it.
Me too. I think too the catch-22 that we'll just in speaking on would be like, what does happen when we decriminalize cannabis with small business, with craft business, and what does the future, that immediately opens up all the borders. We immediately have a 3-tier distribution, which is very similar to alcohol. So I think it's the ultimate catch-22 truly is that like the people like me, the legacy operators that like want to still be in the game and not be put out by Marlboro, but it's a thin line because we want to bank and we want to be able to get investment and we want to be able to compete in these ways that most normalized industries can. But at the same time, we know as operators that if and when, not if, but when everything is unregulated completely or deregulated, descheduled, what does that look like for people like me and my brother or the smaller versions of me and my brother all around there?
It's a good question. Time will tell. I think I don't know if that's rhetorical or we answered or not, but I hope that people like your brother and the small to medium sized businesses at least have a few years of enjoying that time,
Right.
before the big corporate takeover. And
Yeah.
that's my hope, because hopefully at that point you're getting acquired or you make some good money initially until all these businesses are acquired and there's 2 or 3 big players. But I think there's hope. So you're in space right now, and you guys have all the tools. You're vertically integrated. So keep up the great work, Marie. You guys are doing good stuff.
Thank you, Kevin. Have fun in Texas. Enjoy your cheap electricity.
And no state income tax.
And no state income tax. Don't get me started. It was a pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you later, guys. Bye.
Have a good day.